those of you, probably not many of you even, let's see if we even landed live there. If not, then we're going to just go ahead with our plan.
Okay.
Let's see. And if you're watching, those of you who are watching, you're probably wondering what in the world is going on. Well, we had some technical faux pas here. LinkedIn just wasn't going to let us be great today. So I just find this all really.
You can really tell the difference in quality, Zoom versus Restream. Big difference.
Yeah, it's a different setup and all that stuff. And it's just not letting us be great. Well, we're going to move on. We're going to record. It said we were live, and then it said we were streaming, and then we weren't streaming. So I don't know. I wish there was an easier way. I don't know why today is so different than any other day, but we're going to work with what we got. All right, so welcome to the Modern Job Search Specialist Show. This is Mark Anthony Dyson. For me, it's Damian Burkle. We are recording this as we hope to be live, but LinkedIn was just not going to let us be great today. So unfortunately, we have to do with what we have to do with. That is, we're recording the show on YouTube. In the meantime, thank you, Damian, for joining us. How are you today?
I am fine. A little disoriented here because the medium that we're using is backwards for me. So every time I do this, it's like in reverse. But
it's like that on Zoom as well. Your right's your left is right. It's like a mirror.
Other than that, Mark, I am just fine. Thank you very much.
Okay, so that's a good thing. Well,
yes.
being that as it may, we've got a few things to cover. But first, I want to cover this one thing with you. Did you know that there are 19 states and 21 cities that have a law or have laws on salary history?
I just read that, and thank God, because it always puts the job seeker at a disadvantage when they have to review salary.
Yeah. So if you go to HRDive, that's HRDIVE.com, and then you put in salary history, you'll get their article, which they keep updating. And there are 19 statewide bans, and there are 21 local bans. In other words, there are 19 states that have the law. There's 21 states that actually amend it, and they make it a little bit more specific to that different city. Excuse me. So, for instance, San Francisco is one of those states. San Francisco has an amendment other than what California statewide says. So if you were to read the law, California is probably one of the first states in the whole country that actually has the whole minimum wage ban, as well as the ban the box ban. The ban the box ban has to do with federal prisoners having to check a box as whether they've been convicted of a crime or not. That box no longer exists in a lot of states. California is one of them. San Francisco goes a little bit deeper. I don't want to get really too deep into it because then we have to decipher it. But actually, it's pretty clear. But I just want to make people aware of that particular resource because I know a lot of career coaches who will say there's a ban in your state. They're not supposed to ask. That's not true. One, there's ban in certain states, and there's other cities that have the ban. So this is a good reference for people to check, and they can go ahead and check to see how it applies in their state and then in their city. The same thing it is for parental leave. Parental leave is not created equal across the country. It's different for different states. There's some that have the law that recognize the law, but they don't apply it the same way. And there's some states that are just mandatory that each person has to have access. Some states allow the father to take the leave. Some, even though the federal law says it's available, many times the issue is pay. So if there are certain states where it says you've got to pay people while they're on leave and still have their job for 12 weeks at least minimum. I think some states may have enacted the 16 week. I'm not exactly sure. Some of this is from memory. I plan to do a show on this down the line for the Voice of Job Seekers during the summer. It was a live broadcast because I know some folks who want to come on. But all that to say is that the parental leave is also different for different states. So I would say when you hear somebody say that you should look at your salary, make sure you don't do this and do that for a salary history. I would check specifically what applies to your state. There are other states that actually have, of course, right now, most of the states are pretty wide open as far as what could be asked and what couldn't be asked. And even if they have a ban on it, they might have a little line about how lawful it is. That's, I think, another layer. So if you told somebody and reported that person, it may not be necessarily an enforceable law as it is in certain states.
Right. It's an example of the second golden rule. Do you know what that is, Mark?
I forgot. It's been years since I've even heard the term golden rule.
As you know, I've been out of work a number of times and have to negotiate salary and fill out employment forms, and it varies from employer to employer. But when it comes to applying for a job, negotiating for a position, the second golden rule is he or she with the gold rules. And right. And what I mean by that is if you want to work for a company, you're going to have to play it their way, regardless of what the law is. And if you are uncomfortable, then stop the process. But understand that, unfortunately, in the application process, it is heavily weighted in favor of the employer. And I'm confident at some point in the future we'll do a segment on salary and how to negotiate, and we might even get into the Damian dance when it comes to salary, because at one pit meeting, at least a quarter, I will have every person in the room fire as many salary-related questions as possible, and I show them how to dance around that issue for as long as possible.
Yeah, in fact, we can even have a guest on it. 'Cause I know somebody who does this on the C-suite level. And I think there's a lot to learn from it. Everybody, if you want to go back into the archives on the Voice of Job Seekers podcast, you can find Stacey Hawley, Hawley, and me talking about salary negotiation. And I've written a number of articles about it. You'll even hear some that I've on my YouTube channel of a webinar that I did on salary negotiation for the for Mark Miller's crew. So uh, definitely that'll be something we'll have to explore, and maybe even do soon as we hear more about it. Because I think we are going to hear some more about it this coming summer as people begin to change and start to have questions about how they do that remotely. And you know, it's a different kind of navigation process, but I think all the principles are the same because people are now going to have to look at where they are locally, as a lot of companies will just charge them, will pay salary according to their local where they live. In other words, somebody who lives in San Francisco is going to be one salary, but somebody who lives in Wyoming is going to have another salary range, market value, and they could be drastically different.
Absolutely.
So that could bring up an interesting discussion because as more people begin to look at their salary and finding out what people make, they're going to have questions why somebody in San Francisco possibly making $10,000 or $20,000 more than the person that lives in Idaho. I know that some companies have decided they'll pay the same salary across the board. They've already paid that. They jumped ahead, but I think otherwise there are other companies that are going to be fairly judicious about the region and city and where people are as far as their local markets, compare it to big city salaries and decide to pay the lower. At the same time, those who live in a larger city may be subject to larger tax.
Right.
It's a wrinkle to be thinking of. So if you live in Florida and somebody lives in Los Angeles, although somebody might be at a higher tax bracket, Los Angeles is at 10% state tax, if I'm not mistaken. As opposed to if you live in Florida, let's say you live in Sarasota, Florida, you're not going to be subject to that tax. If anything, you might be subject to possibly no tax at all. I know there's very limited tax on food, but the tax on housing is a little bit different. It might be at 6 or 7%, and that's still, it's still a chasm, but it's a larger salary for a lot of folks. So that'll be something that we'll have to watch.
Absolutely. And in the meantime, I would highly recommend all of Mark's work to those who are with us today. It is well written. It is easy to read. The content is excellent, and you will learn so much so quickly. And no matter where you are in the job search process, Mark is a phenomenal resource. And I highly encourage you to watch his YouTube channel, listen to his show, and utilize his website, because this is a man that works hard, knows the market, but probably the most important thing is he has a heart of gold, and he really cares about your job search and the outcome of your job search.
Thank you, sir. I appreciate that. Your check is in the mail.
Yeah, right.
That was a paid sponsorship. Now back to our show. Let's talk a little bit about Gimmicks and what are they working out for job seekers. And And it's not that I've seen anything specific for people, but I think people often are looking for shortcuts to the point to where they'll and won't have the success because either they have a hard market, they have a hard industry, or the jobs just aren't available, or for the fact that they're not presenting themselves in the right way. So there are people who resort to gimmicks. We've seen recently, and I will mention this one guy who had the cupcakes and has his resume on the cupcakes, and it kind of reached across all platforms on internet and reached nationally, and I think it even had a spot on Good Morning America. Which sometimes it becomes problematic when people do those kind of things because yeah, that person they use ingenuity and they use some marketing savviness in order to get their in. But that won't work for everybody, and especially there are industries that are no nonsense. They don't have that sense of humor or levity in their industry. So they're going to poo-poo that. And I want to get your thoughts, and I know that you have a certain amount of conviction about that kind of thing. So your thoughts?
Be careful, be conservative, because you don't really know the company's culture. For example, I had a phenomenal series of interviews at Target, and at the end of it, they wanted me, and I wanted them. And I came home and I thought I did something like I would usually do. I had a lot of thank you notes to write. I wrote them all up and paperclipped them to the letter that I wrote to Human Resources, and I stuck it in a Federal Express envelope and sent it to them. And so they had it like the next day. And what I asked the human resource person to do is, if you could you either hand this to the people or just put it into the mail stream for me? Nobody in the organization could figure out how I did that. And so initially I got a very positive review, but then 1 week went by, 2 weeks went by, 3 months. Finally, I called, finally, the recruiter called me and she was really angry. And I said, okay, what's going on? She said, you're not going to Target. And I said, okay, am I wrong? Did I do something? She said, do you remember that stunt you pulled? I said, no. She said, well, when you put all those letters into Federal Express, nobody in the organization could figure out how you did that. And after that, they all got together and they figured out that maybe for the first year, you would enjoy all of the advanced features and everything as the toilet paper and diaper buyer. But after that first year, after we saw what you did, we figured out that you would most probably find a way around some of our systems to get the results that you were looking for. And here's the kicker. And the reason why you're not going to Target is because they thought that I was too creative. And I lost the job.
Wow. That is really interesting. So the feedback from the recruiter was you were too creative. I've never heard that before, much less isn't that their problem and not your problem, and that they could have fixed one. I think that's brilliant. And I think most people would think that it would be brilliant, right? That you were able to get it passed and that you were able to, and they forgot that you interviewed with them. So, of course, maybe they gave some information out that maybe they shouldn't have, because all you did was go to the HR and HR distributed it.
Mm-hmm.
So they considered that too creative.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
That's amazing. That's wild. Okay. Well, I'm lost for words for that. You're too creative. But having said that, though, and this kind of brings another layer to it, I do believe that job seekers should be audacious or be able to do something audacious during their job search. In your case, that was pretty audacious, and I think even if somebody did that today, even though people wouldn't be able to get it at the office if they did something like that, if they did the exact same, they should, what's the difference between that and sending emails to everyone? Hopefully someone would be, tactful enough to send it to each person they interviewed with. But and really a thank you letter is not really all that audacious. It's kind of standard and sets you apart. In fact, JobBite even had a study showing that only 20% of candidates even send a thank you note of any kind.
Mm-hmm.
And here you were able to penetrate and give to people, and they were up in arms because they had a system that didn't work, a betting system that they didn't expect for anybody to get through. They should fix it and still hired you. because really, I mean, to me, that's not the candidate's fault. You did something so simple that it's sort of like, what's that? It's the comic or the show where the guy is from years ago. He flew ships in he came on board the space fleet, but he did something as simple as let's turn off the radar because everybody has their radios on. He turned his off, and he was able to shoot all the ships down because he's not on the radar. And I think in essence, you weren't on the radar. I'll think of the series. It was on for a short time ago. But the point being is that if you can disrupt the system with something audacious, not gimmicky, then that wins the day. Because all you want to do is get in front of the hiring manager. All you want to do is in your case, you're able to do that. Most people can't get in front of the hiring manager. They have to go through the process. Or only 2 or 3%, according to JobBite, ever gets through the ATS black hole resume thing.
Mm-hmm.
So, being audacious was unacceptable, and it possibly can be with some companies.
Right. And basically, I think what they were looking for were foot soldiers that would come in, do as they're told, do their job. And, there was absolutely no room for thinking outside of the box, which, okay. I mean, if that's what you want, then in all truth, if I would have gone there, I would have been stifled and most probably miserable at the militaristic way, the organization was run. And that's nothing against Target, but I guess the moral to the story is I was being true to myself. The only thing that I wanted to do was get that information to them. And they really objected to it, which kind of goes back to where I began, which is, you want to be conservative. You don't want to be like the job seeker who, and Mark, I know you've heard this, but the day before St. Patrick's Day, she took the hiring manager a arrangement of shamrocks, a
Yeah.
balloon that said Happy St. Patrick's Day, and her resume printed on green paper.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
that is really gimmicky.
That's really gimmicky. And as opposed to what you did was, I think these days should be considered normal because there's nothing gimmicky about it. You were just able, you didn't know, first of all, that you were breaking through their force field. But even at that, you were able to get your message to the right people who said that's unbelievable. And if they wanted a creative director, it would have been an anomaly because then you couldn't be all that creative. So, and you were in sales at that. And that was probably more creative than anybody that they've ever had before. So you're right. They probably weren't looking for somebody. They want a rank and file, somebody who wouldn't stand out, who would just do as they're told. So, that's too bad. But we'll have to revisit that at some point because somebody's going to come up with something. And people always do. They come up with billboards and signs on the streets, saying, hire me. And they'll get all these different hires. There's actually a very interesting thing, an interesting story that I actually have on my Instagram feed from a few years ago, where there's this woman on LinkedIn who's actually a speaker. She speaks around the world on various topics regarding the workplace and diversity, equity, inclusion. A couple of years ago, she had an assistant, and she had a picture with her assistant and telling her about all the great work that she's done. Very quickly, that assistant got more offers than she could possibly handle, basically because of it was her client bragging all about her client who has very high visibility in the corporate world. So getting bragged about by that way provided her with opportunities that she couldn't turn down. I mean, there were CEOs saying, how can I use her? Can I hire? Is she taking clients? Blah, blah, blah. And there were, at the time I think I posted it, there were more than 100 comments on that after only a few hours.
Wow.
And it kept going for a long time. I tried to find out to see how long, how many clients, or if there was a follow-up to that story, that person probably decided to keep it to themselves, but not to mention that they probably got like a lot of work out of it. So all of that to say, if you could find a way to disrupt, as that person did, in a good way, you can not only stand out, but it can go beyond that. And, we talk a lot about bragging about yourself in our culture now, that you should brag about yourself. And I think you should, but when it's pertinent and when it's relevant, not going around with a billboard saying how great you are. But you 10 times that when somebody else brags about you.
Yes. That was exactly what I was thinking. And what audacious is to one person can be conservative to another. But if you are job searching and you're interviewing, I mean, one of the most powerful things that you can do is have others call in that know the hiring manager or his boss and talk about you, because that is something that 99.5% of the people never think about. And you as a brand are leveraged when other people talk about their experience with you. They open the door, they add oil to the process. that is something that anyone can do with a little thought and a glance at their LinkedIn network.
Yeah, yeah. That I think it's really it's more impressive when you're intentional and strategic, and you're also weighing your options. That you don't want to attract attention for the wrong reasons
Mm-hmm.
or be remembered for the wrong reasons. The last example I gave was being remembered for the right reasons. So I think that works out pretty nicely when people think and do things like that. That wasn't even that person's intention, but yet, if you do great work, which is always included whenever we talk about ourselves, and we're talking about the things that we do best, is try to get people to talk about you, especially when you're not even in the room, because that's really the ultimate of branding, right? That people are talking about you when you're not in the room.
And your reputation follows you wherever you go,
Yeah.
and that can be good and that can be bad. And I am thinking about, I mean, I won't mention her name, but I'm thinking of someone that I worked with early in her career, just as sweet could be, team player, would do whatever you want. But over time, she got an attitude about herself and basically became a cutthroat, not nice person. That's not, it isn't what they refer to her as. But
Right.
bottom line is, in her market, she is not welcome anywhere because of her reputation that goes before her. She interviews well, but when they call in her references or talk to others that they know in the industry, to a person, they talk about, how not nice this person has been, not only to vendors, but to her staff. And if you were to look at her resume, you would see high turnover. And it's not that she can't do the job, it's just the way that she does her job and the way that she treats others, again, goes before her. And then there's the complete opposite. If you have done a good job throughout your career and you mobilize your network, and more than LinkedIn, I mean, your church group or Rotary or Boy Scouts, wherever you are active, that's like activating another 40, 50, 60 people out there that are pulling for you. There's a member of professionals in transition that I'm working with, and 9 out of the past 10 interviews have come through various groups that he belongs and serves in that he didn't even know about, right? They called him and they said, hey, this position that's going to come open, here's the person to contact. So, be good, be consistent, and your reputation will go before you in a very positive way.
Yeah. And you may have to even be a little strategic in getting that reputation out and open. That's why it doesn't help when you keep your head down and not communicate whatsoever, or that your communication is stunted because of your lack of desire to communicate with other people. But you do 10 times that when you get that LinkedIn recommendation, or somebody posts something good about you anywhere, or you get an email that says, "Great job! I really appreciate you for doing X, Y, Z." You keep those things because those things are the things that you can leverage. In a similar vein, we also, unfortunately, I'm going to have to stop sooner than I thought. But we'll hit this one, and then we'll hit the pause for the show. Um, there is, you know, people lying on their resume,
Yes.
and people are lying about remote work. I'm not going to mention the stories that I've heard because they didn't become national news, but I thought it'd be a good topic to kind of navigate a little bit because people still don't believe that even a white lie is still considered a lie and that it doesn't profit anybody if it lies and distorts about not only just about who you are, but it distorts your ability, what kind of return that employer is going to get by you lying about some experience that you don't have. And that's so unfortunate because we've said, you know, don't lie in your resume. And yet people, and I'm not saying that person heard our call, but we definitely think there's no profit. And it's even normal that it's normalized to a certain degree that people lie or they call it reposition their experience in a sense. You know, you can't say that you managed someone when you only trained the new hire to do your job. You know what I mean? So you can't call yourself a manager. Not on those because manager denotes that you also have some kind of experience with HR issues
Hmm.
these days. And I think that's always been. But if you say, well, I kind of manage, you know, I manage these new hires in the program, that's a lie, even if no matter how you kind of shape it. So I think people are short-sighted in that manner. Do you have some comments on that?
I do. Another quick story. I had
Mm-hmm.
been vetted by a corporation. I had relocated down here. I worked for them for 3 years. Then I was out of work. Then I went to work for another division.
Mm-hmm.
And 2 years in, that's a total of 5 years, I get a call from Human Resources, and they said, you know, we just called your college, and they have no record of you at the university or of ever graduating. And I said, okay. I said, well, where did you call? And they said arts and sciences. And I said, well, I said, I was in the honor college. This is the name. This is the person you need to call, and they'll verify everything, which is what they did. But what was fascinating to me is having already been referenced, vetted, approved, and worked for the company for 5 years, somebody in human resources, probably who had a lot of time on her hands,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
decided to go back and double check to make sure that I was legit. My point being is, you know, you can fool some of the people some of the time. You can fool all of the people, well, however it goes. But the bottom line is, if you lie on your resume, you never know. It's like throwing out a boomerang. You never know when it's going to come back and hit you in the head, right?
Yeah, you've got to be ready to prove every part of your resume and
Mm-hmm.
every part of the application. You've got to be able to prove it. Um, and I know that there are companies who don't care about if somebody's doing a great job and performing at the level and even exceeds that level. They're not going to risk saying, oh, you weren't on this campus, you were on that campus, that they're going to stop you from working.
Mm-hmm.
Because all you're doing is just uh, providing you leverage to go somewhere else and get paid more. Uh, but having said that, I think that if people want to have a steady stream of work coming in their lives, it could be interrupted very much later on. I've heard of cases where people do lie a couple of years, and a couple of years later, they weren't found out at the initial hiring process, but they end up being found out later on that this person was not telling the truth. And sometimes the way that we're even connected, somebody could say, hey, I noticed that you have this person. I had a terrible experience with this person, and this is what we found out. So, you know, we're in the tiers of, we're not the 6 degrees of separation world we were once in. We're more or less of the second and third connection world, if you understand what I mean, of being connected. And that third connection is just a phone call away many times. It depends how those chips may fall. But I think people are not understanding how this whole hiring thing works ultimately. You know what I mean? They look only to get past the finish line, but you still got to collect the trophy and keep it on the shelf in the long term.
Absolutely. And, you and I have shared with our audience how vital it is to have a full and robust LinkedIn profile that mirrors your resume. You're putting yourself out there, and you don't know who the hiring manager or their boss knows and are connected to on LinkedIn. Many times competitors are friends. They're in the same social club, the same country club, the same service organization. And you could be interviewing, and the first thing that most people do is they look at their resume and they go right to LinkedIn. If they're not consistent, that's a problem. But without even giving references with LinkedIn, you can get checked out and it would never show up. You would never know it. And so why take the chance of lying and making yourself look like, you're playing a game or you have no integrity? You don't have time for that. I would rather have a person who is hungry to learn and has a little bit less of what it takes in qualifications than someone who comes in and razzle dazzles everybody and lies on their resume. Because ultimately, I don't know about you, but I have worked with people who have fluffed their way in, and once they're in, they get eaten alive because everything that they said was not true. And when they're held to the fire, they don't perform. And I've seen it cost people their jobs because of exaggeration and lies on their resume. Don't do it. Lie.
Yeah. Usually it comes out in one way or another. I think it definitely we can say that. Still, there are people who are going to be desperate and will try to exaggerate their through hiring processes. And it really doesn't work ultimately. So, don't lie on your resume. It's not a good look. So we're going to need to end the show at this particular point. You 15 minutes than we usually do, but there is something that's pressing that I keep getting messages about. So I better get going. Where can people catch you these days, Damian?
They can either catch me at jobsearching.org or DAMIAN.BIRKEL1@gmail.com, or just look me up on LinkedIn and there's more contact information there. And Mark, I just want to thank you because this has been an excellent conversation.
Yes, I thank you for joining me for the conversation. And you can also join us on our YouTube channel. Just look up the Modern Job Search Checklist on YouTube, and you'll be able to find the videos that we've done so far. I'm trying to get more of them up there. I'll probably have this one up there this afternoon. Let's see. In the meantime, I'm Mark Anthony Dyson. Catch me at thevoiceofjobs.com. Follow my LinkedIn profile at Mark Anthony Dyson. In the meantime, thank you very much for joining. You all have a good day.